Hi there. Welcome to the From Lab to Launch podcast by Qualio, where we share inspiring stories from the people on the front lines of life sciences. Tune in and leave inspired to bring your life-saving products to the world.
Thank you for joining us on From Lab to Launch today. I'm Meg from Qualio, and it's my pleasure to be your host and introduce you to the movers and shakers of modern life sciences. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and we'd love it if you could give us a review on Apple or Spotify. And if you want to be on the show, please see the application linked in the show notes. Today, we're heading across the Atlantic to speak to Dr. James Field, CEO of London-based LabGenius Therapeutics. LabGenius has a really exciting mission. James and his team of 60 scientists and engineers believe in the powerful combination of human and artificial intelligence and are pioneering an machine learning-driven protein engineering platform, EVA, that can design and execute experiments for the development of next-gen antibodies, including complex multispecifics. LabGenius has already raised over 75 million in venture capital and R&D deals with some major pharma and biotech players. After founding the company in 2012, James was named in the Forbes 30 Under 30 list for science and healthcare and even won Innovator of the Year award from the UK's Biotech and Biological Sciences Research Council. Let's bring James in and discuss his exciting work. Welcome, James.
Thanks so much, Meg. It's great to be here.
Great. It's really clear from reading about you that the synthetic biology is really your superpower. You have a master's degree and your doctorate from Imperial College in London to prove it. Why does that field resonate so much with you, and how did you fall into it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know about you, but I grew up, pre it's like the pre-Netflix days, and you turn on TV and you see what's on TV, and more often than not, you just find there's some nature show playing on some channel, and I just fell in love with those nature shows, and really it was folks like David Attenborough going exploring the world and really finding all these incredible ways in which organisms and creatures had adapted to the most hostile environments, and it was really through that I began to see biology as a technology, really, as a way in which processes like evolution could find these incredible solutions to these problems. And I fell in love with biology, and I signed up for a degree at Imperial in biology and microbiology. And I got to the end of that degree, and I was ready to go out and do what most Imperial grads did at the time, which was going into finance or consulting or the law or something like that. And then I discovered this thing called the iGEM competition, the International Genetically Engineered Machine Competition. And for the first time, it kind of opened my eyes that there was this field called synthetic biology. And for the first time, rather than looking at biology as a descriptive subject, it was actually possible to really take the building blocks of life and start to create new biological circuits and organisms and proteins. And I completely fell in love with the concept of that, and the ability to actually kind of get into the lab and get your hands dirty and try to build some stuff. So that was the start of the journey, and it's been a bit of a roller coaster going from undergrad to master's to PhD to starting a company during the PhD and building LabGenius up to what it is today.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit more about that journey of how you've founded and scaled LabGenius Therapeutics. What was your big mission or goal when you set out to get your investment partners?
Yeah, so as I say, I started this PhD really I'd fallen in love with the concept of synthetic biology, and at the time the approach, this was sort of pre-machine learning, pre-AI, that had really sort of started to be used in the field, and the approach was that you could take these kind of macroscopic engineering principles and scale them down onto biology and sort of design these genetic circuits by hand, and I was the first cohort in of these synthetic biologists into this new program, this new field. And I, like my peers, we'd all designed these circuits, and we spent a year, cloning together the parts and getting everything ready. And then came the moment to stick them in a cell and see if they worked. And pretty much across the board, nothing worked as we really expected. And there was this kind of like aha moment of, oh my God, humans are terrible at designing these biological systems. And retrospectively, really that's no surprise at all. The human brain did not evolve to understand how these molecules work. We kind of evolved to just survive on the savannah. So it was no surprise that my kind of intuition as a human didn't scale down. But I was doing that research at the time when the cost of gene sequencing and synthesis was really coming down. Automation was starting to be used a lot more. And there was this thing called machine learning that everyone was getting really excited about that has obviously existed as a field for a very long time. But because the power of compute was changing and the ability to digitize a lot of biological information, folks were starting to be able to use it in this really meaningful way in day-to-day research. And I felt actually this was a really opportune moment to combine those disparate technologies together, the ability to conduct high throughput experimentation with some of these computational methods, to really start to engineer proteins in a way in which traditional rational design couldn't. And it was by bringing those pieces together that suddenly these genetic systems, these proteins that we've been trying to make before, they suddenly started working. And that was the moment where I was like, aha, there's really something here. But I myself, as an individual, I can't build this by myself. I'm going to need a team of people because the real vision here is, can we build this closed loop platform that really combines high throughput experimentation with machine learning to iteratively design, build, and test and learn and create these new kind of very high functional molecules. And the journey that we've been on has been one where we've brought together this incredible team of 60 scientists and engineers, raised over $75 million, and actually created a platform that can really start to deliver some therapeutic antibodies that we really think could be game changing for a whole range of indications.
Well, tell me a little bit more about that. What are the unique technologies and processes that set LabGenius apart from other companies when it comes to antibody and drug discovery?
Yeah, so we kind of start with a sort of like patient-centric view here. We say, for the patient, what are the big challenges that these folks are currently facing? And within the area of oncology, which is where we're building our internal pipeline, a real big challenge in the world of biologics, at least, is that these molecules, when it comes to addressing solid tumors, the target space is really tough. The targets that you really want to hit there, they're expressed on both your healthy cells and your disease cells, albeit maybe at slightly different levels with a higher level of expression on the disease cells. Now, the challenge that conventional antibodies have is that they typically will bind to the receptors irrespective of whether they're present on the healthy cells or the disease cells. And the net impact of that is you get a lot of your healthy cells caught in the crossfire. And what that means for the patient is, horrible dose-limiting toxicities, nasty side effects, and even a lot of these molecules never make it through the clinic itself. When you think about this as a problem, it's kind of it's unsurprising, really, because if you think of antibody engineering as a technology, when these antibodies first started to play with them, the goal really wasn't to kind of create these complex molecules that could, take multiple inputs and make decisions and have logic encoded in them. It was simply find something, bind to it, ideally kill it, in a lot of cases in oncology. And what we're seeing now is this kind of next wave of antibodies being developed by folks like us and others, where actually you're trying to create far more sophisticated molecules that, as I say, can take multiple inputs and actually really have some kind of complex function. So in the case of our molecules, what we're programming them to do is to be able to differentiate between healthy and disease cells based on differential receptor levels, and then make a decision over which cell to kill. Now, the challenge there is if you really want to kind of identify these molecules, they're intrinsically exceptionally rare. The way that we think about this whole problem is somewhere in this theoretical space that we called antibody design space, the perfect molecule is there, and it's just a case of how can you find it. And these molecules with really kind of complex, high-performing properties, they're very, very rare. And the way in which you kind of fish them out of this space is you've got to run very disease-relevant, complex biological assays. And the challenge with running those assays is that they're intrinsically quite low throughput assays. So the approach that we take here is we use a lot of robotic automation to conduct those assays at a fairly high throughput, far higher than you would find in most other biotech and pharma companies. And then we pair that with machine learning. And that's where the magic happens. It's that pairing of machine learning and high throughput experimentation that allows us to then to extrapolate to a much larger area of design space and find these high-performing molecules. So what we can do at LabGenius that's quite differentiated is to be able to explore much, much larger areas of design space, find these really kind of rare, high-performing molecules, and really just to put some numbers on that. The molecules that we're finding with this process against really quite challenging targets have complete on-off killing selectivity. So they're completely able to differentiate between healthy and disease cells. When we compare these against molecules that are currently in the clinic, for one of the early programs that we ran, we found we could improve killing selectivity by over 400 times relative to the best molecule in the clinic. So I get really excited by this because I know what these patients are currently going through. I know the side effects they're experiencing, and the opportunity to give them maybe more efficacious treatments with fewer side effects is a really kind of motivating mission.
Absolutely. That's a staggering statistic. And it sounds like you're able with that machine learning to find those needles in a haystack and find those targeted antibodies. That's amazing.
And maybe just to build on that, like the thing that's probably most astounding here is when you actually look at the designs of those really high performing molecules, they have really, really non-intuitive designs. They're molecules that you never would have designed if you had gone about it using the conventional rational engineering approach. And again, that's not surprising because these molecules have many different parts that interact with each other in complex ways in this highly non-intuitive fashion. But it feels really amazing when you look at these molecular designs and you think, I could have never made this myself, but we have a process, this autonomous process here that really does combine the best of human and machine intelligence and is able to identify these high performing molecules.
This is such an exciting space to watch. This is fascinating, James. What has been your biggest challenge as CEO, and what have you learned so far in your journey there?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, I guess I started this whole process as a bench scientist. That's my background. Taught myself a little bit of coding as well in order to kind of get the business off the ground and really start build the V1 of our platform. But I really quickly realized that I would need to build around me to really make this real a team of really experienced data scientists, data engineers, molecular biologists, synthetic biologists, cell biologists, experienced drug hunters. You name it, you've got to bring all of those functions together. And everyone speaks a very different language. Everyone has a very different background, different styles and ways of working. And I suddenly realized, yes, I'm a scientist, but actually I'm no longer trying to solve a sort of deep scientific problem myself. What I'm really, as a CEO, trying to solve is that organizational engineering challenge of how do you bring together such disparate disciplines in a way in which folks can do their best work. And I see this challenge coming up in a lot of companies that are trying to bring these disparate technologies together. It is a really, really challenging thing to do. And we've tried things that don't work, and we're iteratively getting better, I think, around finding the ways in which you can bring these teams together to work and create incredible results.
Yeah, what a different way to think about it, like coming from solving the little science, on such a small scale to these big organizational, how do we get all of these people to work together is great insight into the shift in your roles that you've taken. For you, what do you think needs to change in drug discovery, and how are you driving that with LabGenius?
Yeah, so I mean, again, the way that I kind of look at this, and I try and look at this from a patient-centric view, is what do we need to change for patients? And the thing that you ask anybody about around, who's receiving cancer treatment or knows someone who's about to receive cancer treatment, there's that immediate sense of anxiety because there's always that balance from the oncologist perspective as how do you balance quality of life with the impact of the treatment. And should that trade-off really exist? Ideally not. It should be the case that you could take medicines and they're just going to either make you better or you shouldn't have to kind of be juggling those two pieces. And what that boils down to is how well is this molecule able to perform? How toxic is it? What's that therapeutic window? And I think the opportunity that we have here is to bring together these disparate technologies to create molecules with really these very wide therapeutic windows that allow us to give patients options where they don't have to be kind of considering, should I even be taking this medicine? Is it even worth it?
Yeah. Yeah, what a big impact that'll be for cancer patients in the future. Now, Qualio is a quality management software provider. and quality and compliance are near and dear to our hearts. Mine in particular, I'm our quality manager as well. How do quality and compliance guide you at LabGenius, and how is it going to guide you in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, I just, I guess, mentioned the challenge of bringing together these disparate technologies. One of the things that we realized right at sort of the beginning stages, when we brought together these disparate disciplines of, say, molecular biology and machine learning, the machine learning scientists looked at the way in which we'd designed our experiments and said, "Hey, look, I'm sorry, we're going to have to redesign this from scratch, and we're going to have to redesign this so that the experiments are designed specifically to produce machine learning grade data. It isn't the case that you can just run an experiment and just chuck the data over a wall to a group of machine learning scientists, and then they're going to chuck something back." And it all comes down to data quality. And so the way in which we design the experiments, the way we conduct them, account for this huge biological variability that you can see. It's all with quality in mind. And it's, there's that old adage of garbage in, garbage out, and it's so true here. So the whole, I guess, unique differentiation that we have is we've built this integrated closed loop system that generates, vast amounts of machine learning grade data. And it takes time. You have to be very thoughtful, but if you can do it, it ultimately allows you to create and identify incredible molecules.
Right. Thank you for sharing that with us. Could you also share a pivotal moment you've had in the company's development where you've made a tough decision and how that outcome played out for you?
Yeah, well, yeah. As a CEO, I think you're making tough decisions every day, but probably one of the most memorable, I would say, is, I'm a scientist. I love technology. I love science. I get so excited when, I read a new paper and think, how can we apply this? What can we do? What are the potentials of this technology? What are all of the different applications? And I think, the constant learning and reminder that I have to kind of, intone to myself every day is that, as a business, you've just got to be laser focused. You've just got to narrow that focus down onto one thing. And I think that's like a real challenge, because when you're working with a technology like this and you can see so many different applications of it, it feels like you're in a sweet shop or something like that. But to build a business where you're truly differentiated, and you can make ultimately a real impact to patients, it requires that laser focus. And so I think the big learning is saying no to all of the opportunities that in a parallel life you would love to explore, you would love to dedicate resource or time to, but would be compromising, your core objective, your core mission. That's a constant challenge. And it's not just a challenge for me, it's a challenge for, everybody in the team, because we all see like the exciting applications and ways in which this technology could be applied.
Yeah, that's great advice for our CEOs out there starting to think. It's easy to see all the other things that are possibilities, but to keep that laser focus, I think is great advice. Are there any other tips or tricks you would offer other life science business leaders to help them navigate their careers and make meaningful contributions to science and healthcare?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I guess now, I'm now like a little over 10 years into this journey, and from, starting the company to building it to where it is today. And there've been a lot of ups and downs along that journey. And I would say probably the most important thing is, really make sure you're working on a problem that every morning you can kind of like get out of bed and feel really excited to solve, because it's a really hard industry. It's a really hard space to work. You're grappling not only against you're at the coalface of breaking new scientific ground, really overcoming those scientific challenges, but also doing it within an environment where you've got to ensure the company's financed, you've got to ensure that it's well run, that you're meeting the expectations of investors, and pushing forward the science as fast as you can. It's not easy. So my only advice to anyone, looking to start a career in this space is be really mindful and thoughtful about the problem that you're looking to work on, and think, is this something that I could happily dedicate at least the next 10, 20 years of my life to?
Well, this has been the first 10 years of your journey. What's next in the next 5 years of your journey for yourself and LabGenius?
Yeah. So the company's got to this really interesting phase where we've built out this, exceptional platform. We've created some really exciting molecules. The field is getting really excited, when we present at scientific conferences, and we're getting quite a lot of attention as a business now. one of the impacts of that is I personally receive a lot of emails every day from folks around the world who are battling with cancer, and they're saying, James, I've seen this interview, I've read your paper, I saw a poster presentation or a recorded presentation at a scientific conference. Can I try this molecule? Can I try this drug? Or my father's ill, my son's ill, my wife's ill, and these are really incredibly moving messages that real people who need these medicines today. I recently sat down with the team, and we discussed some of the messages that are coming in, and the whole team were just filled with this sense of, we have to move these medicines forward, we have to move them fast. And so the next 5 years for us is really around taking all of the fruits and the incredible molecules that have come out of our platform, and progressing them as hard and fast as we can into the clinic. And I'm so excited by the prospect of being able to reply to those patients and say, yes, and here are the details of our clinical trial, and speak to your oncologist, and hopefully we can help you. That's why we're all here. That's why we're all doing what we do.
Well, I can't wait to hear more about the next 5 years for LabGenius and beyond. It's going to be a new wave of treatment, I feel like, for cancer patients. Lovely. Well, our last question that we like to ask is more of a fun one. If we ran into you at a bookstore or at your local library, in what section would I find you, James?
Without doubt, in the science fiction section. So, I grew up just devouring science fiction books. And it goes back to this piece around, I think before folks really had the opportunity to play in areas like synthetic biology, the way that they would express all the things that they wanted to build was through this medium of science fiction. And actually, I think there's a continuum there, in the sense that folks imagine, when you especially read some of these books that were written, say, 30, 40 years ago, the worlds that they paint, many of the scientific innovations that seemed really futuristic at those points in time, we use them as our technology today. And so I think reading science fiction is a wonderful way to kind of continually reflect on and think about what the future could look like. So yeah, that's absolutely where you'd find me.
Thanks for joining. Where can those go who want to follow along with your journey and find you and connect?
Okay, yeah, you can find us through our website, but we're also on LinkedIn and X as well.
Lovely. It was such a pleasure, James. I can't wait to hear more about LabGenius and all the wonderful work you're doing.
Thanks so much, Meg.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of From Lab to Launch, brought to you by Qualio. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe and give the show a positive review. It really helps us out. For more information about Qualio, our guest today, or to be a guest on a future episode, please refer to the show notes. Until next time.